500 different gas stations across all of Australia ran dry last month. Pumps off. Lines around the block at the ones still open. Diesel passed $3 a litre, and in Queensland, a single BYD dealership was reportedly moving 800 cars a day. And that's the image I'm going to start with. And it's not because it's the biggest story today, but because it's the most physical. You can feel it the moment fossil fuel infrastructure stops being this inconvenience we have to deal with and starts just becoming absent. And what rushes in to fill that void. Okay, and Australia isn't where I'm going to spend most of our time, because yesterday's biggest story is about a country that looked at the most consequential confrontation in the AI industry and saw not a crisis, but a recruitment opportunity. So the Financial Times reported yesterday that the British government is actively courting Anthropic, the company behind Claude, for a major UK expansion. And we're talking an enlarged London office, a potential dual stock listing, proposals led by the Department of Science, Innovation and Technology, with the Prime Minister's office behind it. And they plan to present the whole package to Anthropic's CEO Dario Amodei when he visits London in late May. Now the timing here is everything. Anthropic is in the middle of a legal confrontation with the U.S. Department of Defense, as you all know. The Pentagon designated the company as a supply chain risk because of its safety commitments, its refusal to build autonomous targeting systems, its restrictions on surveillance applications. Judge Lin issued a preliminary injunction blocking that designation, calling embedded AI values protected speech. The administration, of course, appealed, and briefings are due on April 30th. And in that exact window, while America's defense establishment is trying to punish a company for holding to its principles, Britain walks in and says, "Come here. Bring your safety commitments. We want them." That's a complete inversion, because for years now, the conventional wisdom, according to the current administration in America, is that safety commitments are a handicap. They slow you down, and they limit your addressable market. They scare off government contracts. But here's Britain treating those same commitments as sovereign industrial assets. So the logic is, if a company will hold the line under pressure from the Pentagon, it won't cut corners for anyone. And that credibility is worth something. It's worth a stock listing. It's worth reshaping where a frontier AI capability physically locates itself. It's worth where on the planet a frontier AI company will call home. The commercial reward for principled refusal has gone from consumer subscriptions to nation-state courtship in under 3 months. And the secondary market confirms this. Bloomberg and Rainmaker Securities reported this week that Anthropic's private shares are the most sought after in the entire technology sector. $2 billion in buyer demand, and effectively no sellers. Claude's paid subscriptions have more than doubled since January. Every escalation against the company's position has produced the opposite of its intended effect. The Pentagon's designation drove consumer adoption. The appellate's challenge is now driving sovereign recruitment. What's emerging is a new geography of frontier AI, one where capability concentrates not in the jurisdiction with the most compute or the loosest values, but in the jurisdictions that treat embedded values as infrastructure worth protecting. Britain has been building toward this through its AI Safety Institute and a bilateral safety agreement with Australia signed earlier this month. But a dual stock listing would be a qualitatively different thing. It's not just a handshake. That's embedding Anthropic's governance model onto British financial and industrial architecture. So the map of where the most powerful AI systems live is being redrawn, and the compass needle is pointing toward safety, not away from it. Okay, let's shift away from the geopolitics of AI to the plumbing, because something broke yesterday that reveals a fault line running through the entire AI industry. Anthropic blocked OpenClaw and other third-party agent frameworks from accessing Claude through flat-rate subscription plans. This is something they'd hinted at for a while and finally went ahead and did. So if you're not deep in the developer world, let me quickly translate. OpenClaw is an open source framework, and it lets people build autonomous AI agents, software that simply acts on its own, continuously, without a human typing prompts. Now, these agents were running on Claude, many of them, through a $200 a month max subscription, and there were a lot of them, an estimated 135,000 active instances. Here's the math problem. A single OpenClaw agent running autonomously for a full day can consume between $1,000 and $5,000 in API equivalent compute. So using a $200 unlimited subscription for that is a bit like buying an unlimited subway pass and using it to commute by private helicopter. The economics simply don't work. So Anthropic shifted all those agents to pay-as-you-go billing. And some users are facing cost increases of 50 times their previous monthly outlay. So for hobbyist developers and solo practitioners who built their entire workflow around flat rate access, this is devastating. Boris Cherny, Anthropic's head of Claude Code, described it as an engineering constraint. But the timing, weeks after OpenClaw's creator Peter Steinberger joined OpenAI, has a lot of people suspicious. Steinberger says that Anthropic copied popular OpenClaw features into its own closed system, and then locked out the open source alternative. Very Apple of them. But I want to push past the corporate drama because the structural issue is more important than who's mad at who. Every AI subscription on the market was designed for humans, for conversational use. You type a question, you get an answer, you go away for a while. Coding in Claude Code and Codex kind of inverted that a little bit, where humans were able more and more recently to add a prompt and have it run autonomously and build autonomously for several hours at a time. But this is still bounded and intermittent demand. An autonomous agent, however, completely autonomous, is the opposite of that. It runs continuously. It generates a sustained and open-ended compute request that scales with the complexity of the task. The subscription model and the agent economy are fundamentally mismatched. Anthropic is just the first major provider to collide with this publicly. Now, other companies like OpenAI have actually encouraged people to use their OAuth subscription flat rate fees for OpenClaw and similar. So this is going to get interesting to see how the compute that OpenAI is burning to allow for that is going to make sense mathematically for their bottom line. But the collision matters here because it determines who gets access. Flat rate subscriptions democratized AI, $20, $200, whatever the tier. You knew what you'd spend month to month. Pay-as-you-go pricing, though, makes agent capabilities accessible primarily to people and organizations that can absorb the variable costs. The question of who can run the most powerful autonomous agents then, at what price as well, just went from theoretical to very real. And yesterday, Tencent launched Claw Pro, which is an enterprise agent management platform adopted by over 200 organizations so far, and it means that the commercial infrastructure for autonomous agents is growing at the exact moment that the pricing foundation underneath it is cracking open. And while we're on Anthropic, there's a security story here that's darker than even the pricing one. Last week, Anthropic's Claude Code source was accidentally exposed through a misconfigured NPM package. 512,000 plus lines of TypeScript. Embarrassing? Yes. But what happened next is even dangerous. Hackers took that leaked code, embedded InfoStealer malware onto reposted copies of it, and uploaded them across GitHub. Sponsored Google ads started directing developers to fake Claude Code installation guides that actually delivered the malware. The attack exploits something specific about how developers install tools. You go to a website, you copy a terminal command, you paste it, you run it. That workflow is built on trust. Trust that the source is legitimate. When a legitimate source code is out in the wild and getting cloned by threat actors, that trust becomes a weapon. Anthropic initially tried to take down over 8,000 GitHub repositories containing the leak, and that narrowed it to 96. But the code has been forked more than 50,000 times. It can't be contained. Features it revealed including an always-on background agent called Kairos, and 60-plus unreleased feature flags are now permanently public. Here's the pattern that we need to see here. Yesterday we talked about the MareCore breach, a compromised open source library exposing training data from multiple frontier labs at once. Now we have a leaked source code being weaponized within days through poisoned repositories and fake search ads. Both attacks exploit the same thing: the AI industry's deep dependence on open source infrastructure and rapid developer adoption practices. The speed that makes AI development possible is the same speed that makes it vulnerable. And the defense response can't be, well, slow down, because nobody will. The defense has to be new kinds of trust. New kinds of trust verification that move at the same pace as the development itself. Provenance checking, cryptographic signing, automated supply chain audits. The security architecture for the intelligence era hasn't been built yet, and what we're watching is the stress test that will force it into existence somehow, or make us deal with this whole thing an entirely different way, especially with quantum computing coming down the pipeline that will be able to break through basically any encryption that we have right now. Okay, I want to shift away again from infrastructure to something genuinely surprising about how intelligence works on the foundation level. Because a study published yesterday in Nature Communications challenges an assumption the AI industry has been spending hundreds of billions of dollars on. Researchers at Zhejiang University took a standard AI version model, SimCLR, CLIP, DynoV2, and tested them across a range of sizes. As they scaled the models from 22 million parameters up to 304 million, performance on concrete tasks improved steadily. Recognizing a specific bird, for example, identifying a particular car. The bigger the model, the better it got at it. 74.94% accuracy all the way up to 85.87% accuracy. But on abstract tasks, so grouping swans and owls into birds category or birds and horses into animals category, performance actually declined from 54.37% down to 52.82%. So more parameters made the models worse at the kind of things that humans do most naturally. So the researchers tried something different. Instead of adding more parameters, they recorded human brain activity while people looked at images. And they used those neural signals as a training guide. So not as data to memorize, but as a structural template or scaffolding for how to organize the concepts. And the results were a 20.5% improvement in abstract reasoning and few-shot learning. A model guided by human neural architecture outperformed models with 14 times more parameters on these tasks. So this wasn't because they were bigger, it was because they were organized differently. So let me make this concrete. When you see a swan and an owl, for example, you don't just recognize two different animals. You immediately know they're both birds. You know birds are animals, and you know animals are living things. So you build these hierarchies effortlessly, automatically from childhood. The biggest AI models in the world struggle with exactly this. They're brilliant at surface patterns and terrible at categorical thinking. And that's what the Zhejiang team showed, that the fix isn't more compute, it's borrowing the organizational logic of biological intelligence. This sits alongside work that the Century Report has tracked through the world models and the alternative AI architectures arc. Yann LeCun's AMI Labs is pursuing intelligence through world models rather than language prediction. The Mamba architecture outperforming same-size transformers through different mathematical foundations. The brain signal approach adds something new to this particular conversation, using biological neural organization as a direct blueprint. So not reverse engineering the brain, but using it as a tutor, for example. The gap between artificial and biological intelligence may close not by making AI models simply enormous, but by teaching them to think the way we already do, or something similar to that. Okay, one more for today, and this one's quick, but it's wild. Researchers at RMIT and CSIRO, these are Australia's national science agencies, built a working quantum battery prototype, published in Light, Science, and Applications. Here's what's strange about it, though. Conventional batteries, every battery you've ever used, gain nothing from scale when it comes to charging speed. So a bigger battery just takes longer to charge. That's all there is to it. That's a basic physical constraint that we've lived with since really the 1800s, when batteries first started to even become a bit of a thing. The prototype here that they are proposing does the opposite. It charges faster as it gets larger. So this device is a small layered organic structure charged wirelessly by laser, and it exploits quantum superposition and entanglement to achieve what the researchers call super extensive power output. So it's a proof of concept. They're still working on how long the charge holds, but the principle it demonstrates is that quantum effects can produce energy storage behaviors that classical chemistry physically can't. And the stated ambition is EVs that charge faster than filling a gas tank, devices that charge wirelessly over distance. We're not there, but remember, those 500 empty Australian gas stations I mentioned at the top of this video, the immediate replacement is lithium-ion batteries and existing charging infrastructure. But the next replacement, the one being prototyped in labs right now, operates on physics that say the bigger you build it, the faster it works. Now, this is not an incremental improvement to batteries. It's a different relationship between energy and scale entirely. Now, 3 things from the release tracker today. VLLM published version 0.19. This is a massive open source inference update with 448 commits from 197 different contributors. It adds Gemma 4 support and a new feature called trusted routing for direct inference workloads. So if you run models in production, this is your infrastructure. OpenRouter launched Model Fusion, which lets you run multiple AI models side by side and bring up the outputs from those various simultaneously running models together, so in order to improve your answers. Kreuzberg released the newest version of their document intelligence library, and this adds code intelligence and better markdown support for 248 different programming languages like Python, TypeScript, Ruby, and so many more. Now, here's what I am carrying from today. Britain looked at a company being punished for its principles and saw not a cautionary tale, but a recruitment pitch. Zhejiang's researchers looked at the biggest AI models in the world, struggling with something a 5-year-old does effortlessly, and it found an answer wasn't more compute. It was borrowing how humans organize their thought. And Australian physicists built a battery that breaks a constraint we've accepted since before the light bulb existed. What these share isn't really a theme, more of a mood. The assumption that the current way is the only way, that safety is a cost, that scale is the only path to intelligence, that batteries charge slower as they grow. All of those feel solid until someone demonstrates otherwise, and then they just aren't. Very soon watch for Amadei's London visit in late May, because what Britain offers will signal whether sovereign AI courtship is a trend or a one-off. Watch for the first major AI provider to follow Anthropic's lead and restructure agent pricing, because 135,000 displaced agent instances need to land somewhere. And watch for the brain signal training method to get applied beyond vision and into language and reasoning, because if borrowing human neural structure works for sight, nobody's going to stop there. We'll see you tomorrow.